And now from Washington, the Inside Scoop. All the news the government does not want you to hear. Now, here's your host on the Inside Scoop, Mark Levine.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. Tens of thousands, some say hundreds of thousands of people came to march on Washington just last week to end the Iraq War. Who are these people? Where do they come from? Are they professional peace activists? Are they people just like you and me? What motivates someone to get out of their quiet, peaceful home and stand in freezing cold weather for hours to protest our Iraqi war policy? Well, I have a peace activist sitting right here to my right. Her name is Ellen Taylor.
Shit, Mark's thing is not on. That's, Dad, what'd you just do?
Excuse us, mic problems happen. Sitting to my right is peace activist Ellen Taylor. She's a representative of Code Pink. Code Pink is an organization that is Women for Peace and stands for a lot of things, but the most important thing that they're standing for right now is to end the war in Iraq. Ellen Taylor, welcome to the Inside Scoop.
Thank you, Mark.
So answer the question, if you will, that I posed at the beginning. What takes someone, what's your background, where do you come from, and why were you willing to stand out in the cold for hours on end, well, I guess not just last week, but for several weeks now?
For several weeks now.
Or months.
I was born in upstate New York. I am a mother. I have had a profession. I worked for the federal government for several years as an environmental engineer. I was fortunate enough to be able to take early retirement, and I now devote my time to peace issues and also environmental issues because it's together.
Now, how old is Code Pink? How long has that been around?
Code Pink really started in the fall of 2002, in the run-up to the war.
So even before the Iraq War started?
Yes. There was a retreat of a number of women from different spheres, shall we say, but all active, intelligent, compassionate women. And they were at a retreat, and they were having what I call a kitchen table conversation. And they could see the handwriting on the wall, that the drumbeat to war had started. And it was like, we've got to stop this. What can we do to stop this? And at the time, there was the fear and the terror whipping up the populace to support the war. And there were the codes, the terror codes, red.
Code orange, code
yes,
red,
code
red.
Yellow. And so just kind of, how people do around the table, we said, well, code pink. Pink for women, pink for peace. And so that's where the origin of the Code Pink name. And the first action, in fact, was a vigil in front of the White House that started in November of 2002.
Again, 5 months before the war even started.
Absolutely.
It's interesting because some people can say, as I can say, that I was against the war the moment it started, but you folks were against the war even before it started.
Before it started.
Now, how does these grassroots things happen? You knew someone who knew someone, and I mean, tell us the inside scoop, if you will. I mean, just a friend of yours says, I know a friend?
No, well, that is actually how the organization does grow. What happened for me personally, if you want my personal story, as I said, I was in Washington, lived in Tacoma Park, Maryland, actually, worked in Washington.
Sure.
Was very interested in peace, very concerned about the run-up to the war and what I could see happening. And Code Pink, to celebrate the end of this vigil, started in November, on International Women's Day, March 8th, which once again was very, very close to the bombing, the beginning of the war, decided to have a march, which started in what we call Meridian Hill Park, or Malcolm X Park, in D.C., and marched down to the White House, and they had about 50,000 people. Now, I actually didn't go to that march. I went to another march that was
so they had 50,000 people way back in November
of 2002.
Which
just in
is
pink and rainbow balloons and that sort of thing. And that was just, they put the word out to different groups, peace groups, women's groups, and said, we need you to show up. And the internet is a very valuable tool for us. And also the connections we make at church, at school, just the way women connect. So that's
and
how
I
that
actually
worked.
have your website on my website.
Oh, okay.
It's codepinkforpeace.org. It's on my website, Radio Insight.
Also, Code Pink Alert, too.
Oh, codepinkalert.org.
Yes, either one
and
will work.
codepinkforpeace.org. Either way, you can get it to it from my website,
You'll get into it.
radioinsidescoop.com, and it'll take you right to it.
into it.
I want to explore, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
a little personal, because I think it's important to see where people come from this. I don't know if you were of the era of Vietnam, and if you were old enough to remember that and to take part in any of those kinds of protests, or is this new for you?
I was a high school student, so I'm not quite.
Well, no, but I don't know if you but even high school students were involved.
But yes, and
to
I
some
was.
extent. You were.
I was involved in Albany, New York. Once again, where I grew up, there were demonstrations in front of the Capitol. Albany is the capital, so people would march down, and I went with a group of my high school friends.
So this is a lifelong pursuit for
Yes.
you. I mean, the Persian Gulf War as well.
Justice.
Or not
yes,
so much there.
Yes, actually, that I can remember being in DuPont's circle. In terms of the Afghanistan war and expressing concern for the people of Afghanistan and what that war was doing to them. So, yes, peace and justice issues. Once again, I work through many different spheres, through church, through Code Pink, and once again, through friendships. And
now,
affiliations.
some of the criticisms of peace organizations, like, and I don't mean Code Pink necessarily specifically, but that if you're always working for peace, if you're always doing that, then in fact, maybe you're a pacifist. In other words, which you may be, and you may call yourself that. But in other words, if you would say that, well, I guess I can see them differently, in the sense that, for example, someone like me, I was very opposed to the Iraq War from the beginning, but I supported our war in Afghanistan. I figure they attacked us, the Al-Qaeda came from Afghanistan, the Taliban supported them, so, and we may disagree on that, and that's fine. Feel free to disagree with me. I felt that was a just war, whereas the war with Iraq was an unjust war. You, and I don't want to talk for you personally or your organization, is war never just in your view?
My own personal view?
Let's have you speak for yourself.
I do come out of a Christian tradition, and kind of based on my belief, I do believe that there are always alternatives to war.
Always.
So, always.
And so force is not a last resort, force is never a resort.
Yes, I think so.
Is that a Quaker tradition, or I mean, it's very similar to the Quakers.
Right, yes. Roman Catholic, actually.
So, well, let me ask you then.
What would Jesus do, as we say? And, maybe he overturned a few tables in the temple, but,
So how would you have responded then to September 11th, if you don't mind me asking?
Okay.
You must, I'm sure you've thought about these issues.
September 11th, I was actually in Pentagon City. And I think...
and I was in a building bordering the Capitol, so both of us were close to...
very close too.
Right.
Once again, I was probably on the metro, on the going out to Crystal City on the Yellow Line, right at the time the Pentagon was under attack, and I spent the day in Crystal City, watching the smoke and seeing the people streaming down. So yeah, it touched, I think, the people of New York and Washington in a way that
I think
very
it touched
real.
all Americans,
yes,
but,
right.
but those of us who were
very,
close
very
to
real.
it. Well, exactly. I mean, I was at the building
more
that they
than
say,
just
the plane in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, may have been heading for the Capitol Dome, in which case I would have lost a number of friends.
So what was my response,
yeah,
you ask?
Because my response, I have to admit, was one of certainly intense sadness, but also one of anger. I wanted to respond, whereas the war in Iraq, which I would agree with you, had made no sense, and I think is only there for the oil companies, and we can talk about that. I don't think in any sense it was a war of self-defense. The war in Afghanistan I did see as more of a war of self-defense.
Okay. The way I saw it was an act of terrorism.
Right.
And terrorists, I think by definition, are stateless. And for us to take up arms and attack a particular state or group is not necessarily the best way to prevent terrorist attacks and protect the American people.
What about states that support terrorism? Should we seek sanctions of them, isolation of them? I know there were peace activists that complained when we, for example, had sanctions on Saddam Hussein to stop. He clearly is a vicious dictator, and yet the fear is that it harms the Iraqi people. How do you confront, And I'm not saying you also have to have all the answers.
If you look at the history of many of these terrorist groups, the United States was involved historically with them.
That's right.
Prior to their surge in activity in a way that supported their growth.
Certainly true of Saddam Hussein.
By providing arms, by providing training, and by providing cover. So I think that one of the ways that we combat terrorism and address terrorism is by not getting entangled in foreign intrigue that we know or may not know, might have outcomes and consequences that will come back to haunt us in the future.
Well, that's a good point. There's Chalmers Johnson's written a wonderful book called Blowback, which you may have heard of. I've had him here on the show, but talks about sort of the unintended consequences. You know, we support the Shah of Iran to fight the Soviet Union, and then he's a horrible dictator. He's overthrown. The Iranian people help us, as though we support Iraq against Iran, and then Iran against Iraq, and suddenly we find ourselves in the middle between two warring fights.
And I think that, once again, the whole idea of women for peace is that we tend not to take our differences outside, as men sometimes do. We talk them out. And so just for us, the idea of listening as well as talking to your enemy and finding out what is it that's made them their enemy, and have a little introspection. How have I contributed to this situation? So I'm not saying that in every situation that's the appropriate response, but I'm saying by and large America perhaps needs to be more introspective.
Well, it's very interesting what you say. Let's talk about the specifically feminist or women-oriented response. I mean, obviously, obviously there are men that are compassionate and women that are not compassionate. Listen, I'd even be willing to admit I know more compassionate women than compassionate men. In terms of a female-oriented response, I'd be curious to know if Code Pink has reached out to the women of Iraq or the women of Iran or the women of other nations that we might be at war against to find out what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they want.
We actually sponsored a delegation of 100 Iraqi women to the United States, and they visited 120 cities and told their story. We have also sent delegations to Iraq and other Middle Eastern countries, Jordan, Lebanon, and connected with women and women's groups.
What is their story? How is the story of Iraqi women different, say, from the story of Iraqi men? What stories are they telling us?
It doesn't, it doesn't matter what the sphere of conflict is, in my view. Women and children are the ones that bear the brunt of war. And so just not being able to go to the market because there's sniper fire, not being able to feed your family because the breadwinners are out of work, because the economy has been trashed. It's women that are most concerned with putting a roof over their family's head, with feeding their family, and with keeping them safe. And Iraqi women feel powerless to be able to do that.
So I guess it's more day-to-day life that they're concerned about. They're not so much concerned whether it's a Shia state or a Sunni state or a Kurdish state.
No.
They want to feed their families and provide for their children.
And their kids can't go to school, for example.
Sure.
And then there's also the question about, as different groups in the Middle East, and I do not profess to be an expert, but
and you're not on here as an expert,
right.
And I'm not expecting you to be one.
But women have a very difficult time culturally in the Middle East.
Certainly.
And that means that their spheres are limited, and given the shifts of power and government that are occurring in the Middle East, their spheres are apparently becoming more and more limited, and that's very worrisome.
And it is, and actually one of the things I want to talk about when we get back from the break is precisely that. What should the role of women be to help other women in cultures where they're oppressed, and how do you achieve that empowerment for women without the use of force and warlike tactics? That's what I'd like to ask with you after the break. Folks, if you want to join in this discussion, please do so. You're welcome to talk to me, to talk to Ellen, to give your own view. That's what this is all about. Toll free 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. We'll be right back after this.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish...
If you give someone a fish...
You feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, mister, what was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. Today, the Inside Scoop is on a peace activist. It's really on peace activism in general. What makes people become peace activists? What is their passion? I'm talking with an extremely impassioned and compassionate person sitting to my right. Her name is Ellen Taylor, and she is with Code Pink, a group of Women for Peace. And in fact, if we can show out on, this is you, isn't it?
That's me.
That's right there.
In DuPont Circle,
In DuPont Circle with a very nice hat, actually.
That's right, yeah.
With a big smile, working for peace, because it's not all gloom, is it?
No, exactly. As a matter of fact, one of our mandates in terms of Code Pink, we have a few. One is be nonviolent. The other is have a sense of joy and humor. And the third, of course, is wear pink.
Is to wear pink.
And that's really
I should have worn some pink today. I don't have much. But
well, I could probably offer you some.
But I mean, obviously, you have to be nonviolent. It would be counterproductive to have a peace organization that would ever resort to violence. And so that obviously, and Martin Luther King showed the power, as did Gandhi, of nonviolence. But when you talk about the oppression of women all over the world, particularly in the Middle East, though not exclusively in the Middle East, but you look at, for example, Afghanistan, which was, I think, pretty objectively the most repressive regime towards women, the Taliban, in the world. I mean, now we have women being massacred in Darfur. We have all kinds of other situations. But when you deal with a culture that represses women, not just a politician or a political system, but a culture where women, have to wear burqas and can only have their eyes shown through holes. How can you possibly combat that culture? And is that something that Code Pink has tried to do?
No, I don't think once again, that's kind of like, I'm sorry, combating a culture.
Combat, wrong word for a peace organization.
Well,
excuse me, how do you change?
Or even just the imaging.
How do you change?
Understanding.
Okay.
All right. Where, how these women feel about themselves and about their role. There are many women who are fighting very hard in Afghanistan, for example, to retain some power within their family spheres, within government spheres. And what we need to do is learn how to empathize with these women and support them in ways that they feel are appropriate. Not using our own models for what we think
to talk
power
to them.
is or equality is.
Find out what they need.
Right, exactly.
And
because our models are different. My understanding is different. I come from a totally different culture.
And what do they need? I mean, again, whether it's Iraqi women or Afghani women, or again, not just South American women, women in the United States. I don't know if they. I guess they all need different things.
What do women need?
I guess
what
they all need different.
I
guess they all need different things. But particularly in the most repressive cultures, what kinds of things are they asking for help?
I think the biggest thing that women need right now is economic empowerment, and that's where the idea of microlending comes in. Women helping women with small loans so that they can use their skills and get training to develop skills to support themselves and their families.
Yeah, there's I forget the name of the author. You probably remember. He just wrote a book about I think he's from India. I'm sorry, but he did this major microlending. The person who just
won the Nobel Prize.
Right, exactly. I'm sorry, we can't remember his name at the moment.
And there are also several other models for that. And I know women who have gone, for example, to Central America or to Afghanistan and worked with small groups of women. Once again, very much, these are not big AID, government grants. These are privately supported, small-scale efforts to help women help themselves. And I think that is key, because when women have some economic security and have some control over their lives in that way, then they are better able to educate themselves and actually find a stronger voice.
As they say, teach someone to fish and she can fish for herself rather than simply giving her the fish. But when you do these marches in Washington, and by the way, you were at the march just it's a week now, 2 weeks ago. No, I think it's 1 week.
Yeah. Time flies.
And how many people would you say were there? There's some controversy over that.
I know. I've been to a number of marches on the Mall, and I was in the middle of it actually with the very huge Code Pink delegation. I think Code Pink itself, we had a women's convergence before the march at Archives Navy Memorial, where we had a number of speakers, including Representatives Kucinich and Lynn Woolsey and Maxine Waters, the requisite stars, Susan Sarandon, and
I've had Lynn Woolsey and Maxine Waters both on my show. So,
that's very good. So the Women's Convergence, I think, drew about probably 3,000, the neighborhood of 3,000 people.
Now, are men allowed at these things?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, all right, I want to make sure.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And we don't even insist they wear pink, but we do insist they be nonviolent and as compassionate as they can manage to be.
Now, you said there were certain mandates. Now, obviously, nonviolence is one of them. I mean, how much agreement is there among all of you as to your basic goals? Or there must be some disagreement. You have all these people coming together. What are the things that I guess it's fair to say pretty much everyone in Code Pink agrees on? And what are some areas where you might differ?
Well, I think you raise Afghanistan, for example. And I think that there are women in the organization who may have some feelings that there are some cases, particularly in times of clear self-defense.
Right, as 9/11.
Where it may be necessary to defend the country by use of force.
But in terms of course, the war in Iraq, you're
all
united.
But we're pretty much united on the fact that the war in Iraq and the current occupation, as we say, the war is over. What we have now is occupation. Is actually not based on any need for defense on our part.
Now, I don't know if a lot of you are mothers of troops. Cindy Sheehan is certainly a very well-known peace activist whose son died in Iraq. Is she part of Code Pink, or I know she speaks at some of your rallies?
She does. Cindy Sheehan actually is one of the founders of Gold Star Families Against the War. And actually, I met Cindy Sheehan in July of 2004, 4th of July, right up at the Capitol, lots of people there. And there was a peace/anti-war gathering, and she spoke at that. And this, of course, is before Camp Casey, which happened in August of that year.
Where we got to know her, we in the press.
And she and I, after this little rally, peace rally, we had a banner out that said, pink banner, Code Pink banner, that said, Bush lied, innocents died. And she and I just decided, well, we have this banner and we have nothing to do for the next few minutes. Why don't we just go right down to Constitution Avenue, where everybody's kind of feeding into the mall for the fireworks and
July
everything,
4th,
right?
sure.
And just stand there and engage people in conversation, because that's what we do. It's like engage people in conversation, catch their notice. Sometimes I'm wearing pink, sometimes they're both had sons. We were both mothers. She has 2 daughters and a son, Casey, whom she lost. I have a son, Emmett. And we talked, and that's what we did. And she, at the time, kind of felt really compelled to do more. And it was at a Veterans for Peace conference that was held in Austin that August that she was speaking to the group, the Vets for Peace. My husband is actually a member of Vets for Peace. He's a
So your husband is a veteran?
Yeah, Navy. He's actually
still married.
He's an ordained pastor, actually. He was a pastor at Springfield, Virginia.
Now that's very interesting in and of
Presbyterian
itself. Is he now a pacifist?
Always was.
While he was in the Navy, he was a pacifist. I guess he was drafted. I guess it's a different time.
No, he would have been drafted, but he joined the Navy to avoid the draft, as many people who joined the Navy did do, and he, luckily, because he was a college boy, made it into officer candidate school and was commissioned. So, and I think it was his experiences in the military that, one, gives him a profound respect for the mission of the military, gives him a deep sense of resentment when the military is abused and misused, and also, once again, after the military, he did go into the ministry. He is very much a man of peace.
What's interesting is the discussion of the military. It seems like everyone's talking about the military except the military, which isn't really allowed to speak because they literally are shut down from speaking. But you have the Republicans saying that how dare you, Democrats and peace activists, oppose the war, you're harming our troops, how dare you withdraw funds, you're harming our troops. And then you have peace activists, like, for example, there was a Super Bowl commercial last night, which I saw. I don't know if you were a part of that.
I was blown away by that commercial.
It was a very powerful commercial by veterans of the war themselves, including a man who lost his arm, talking about bringing the troops home. And what's interesting to me is how both sides use the troops, and I don't know what's fair, what's not fair. I want to address that with you and also with callers. If you want to call in, the toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. Before we go to break, my producer tells me that the man who won the Nobel Prize for the microloans is Muhammad Yunus of Grameen Bank.
There you go.
We both know who we're talking about. Now the listeners know Muhammad Yunus of Grameen Bank. I actually saw him, I think, on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. But this is where I first heard this concept of microloans. Really, we always think working at the macro level, but sometimes you can help at the smallest possible level. 888-488-MARK. We'll be right back after this.
I think you should wear a tie.
Dad, nobody wears ties to school.
Tie says you're serious. It'll make a good impression. And remember, you're there to study,
to learn, and to make something of myself. I got it.
Almost half of all UNCF students are the first in their family to go to college.
They have some great architecture classes.
Dad, I'm not really interested in architecture.
Well, keep your options open. And remember, no girls until your work is done. And I'd make sure that I got my lunch.
Dad, you're not going. I am.
I know.
Well, listen, we better get going. Don't want to be late the first day anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're the first to go, you're going for a lot of people. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Magellan? No. Well, who knows what Magellan did?
Sail around the world.
Right. Now.
Sometimes, a child who doesn't seem interested is really a child with a speech or hearing problem.
Blackbeard? Who said Blackbeard? And what did Blackbeard do? He was a
pirate.
Time and again, it's been shown that a young student's ability to read and learn begins with speech and language and hearing skills.
Jamie, are you with us? Who can tell us?
He wanted to go to India.
Many communication disorders can be detected early and corrected, so learning and literacy skills can develop normally. Make sure your child has the speech, language, and hearing abilities to keep up in class. For more information, visit asha.org. A public service message from the American Speech, Language, Hearing Association and this station.
New route to
Asia.
Good.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. If you want to join us here on the Scoop, it's easy to do. Pick up the phone and dial 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. Sitting to my right is Ellen Taylor. She is a peace activist. She's a longtime peace activist, dating back to her high school days protesting the Vietnam War. She is a member and a representative of Code Pink, Women for Peace organization that was one of the I don't know how to say, the motivating forces, let's say, behind the Grand March on Washington that occurred just last week. Before the break, we were talking about the military. You said your husband is himself a Navy veteran and a minister. Of course, Cindy Sheehan lost a son in the war. It seems that because men and women in the military are not allowed to speak, and I understand that. There's political reasons for that. You don't want the military taking political stands. That's the law. But it's hard to know exactly how people are feeling. I know that a lot of veterans are despondent. They're in the war. They're looking for a way out. They don't know what we're fighting for. In fact, I myself, just 2 weeks ago, had on this show 2 veterans, one who supported the war, one who was opposed to the war. So I know there are mixed feelings. But compared with, say, Vietnam, there seems to be a real difference. In Vietnam, it seemed peace activists were kind of attacking the men and women in the military for their aggressive actions, and many of them were, don't get me wrong, but it seems there's a very different feeling towards the military today. Do you think that's fair?
Well, you know, I just heard a piece on the mythology of the spat-upon soldier with regard to Vietnam. You know, once again, myself, I saw soldiers who had been sent to Vietnam as people like my brothers. I had friends who went to Vietnam. I know that they were
drafted, for one thing. They didn't even volunteer.
They didn't want to go.
Right.
And what I saw happen to them as a result of their military training, what I saw happen to them as a result of their experiences in Vietnam, they came back changed people. And
broken, post-traumatic stress disorder,
PTSD,
more violent.
Absolutely, and truly traumatized by not just what they had seen, but what they felt they had done. That they had in fact denied at some very basic level their humanity, and so I do not, never did then, nor do now, see soldiers as anything but persons who have been sent to do a job, and in many cases it's a job that they may have initially believed in. Sometimes they change their mind. I talk to soldiers at Walter Reed Hospital where we have a vigil Friday nights. Sometimes they come out and they talk with us, and their mission is supporting their buddies who are still in Iraq, for example.
Very interesting that you point that out, because I do think that is what motivates the everyday soldier more than the overall grand political questions. These, you know, maybe that motivates the generals, but the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds that are there, they form these close bonds, and they don't want to see their buddy die. And it's interesting because we claim to have a volunteer force, but there's a very heavy backdoor draft. There are people who join the National Guard in Louisiana thinking they take care of hurricane victims and are sent to Iraq. There are people whose tours have been extended 2 and 3 times. Does your organization reach out to the veterans? Do they? How does? I mean,
we work with Vets for Peace very closely, actually. We also work with, this is a Gold Star families and also military families against the war. We also, there is an organization, the War Resisters League, that works actively with active duty military personnel who have feelings about the war that are so strong that they feel that they can no longer continue to serve in the military. Today, February 5th, was the start of Aaron Watada's court-martial, and I'm sure you've heard of this.
I have, but why don't you tell our listeners about it?
Aaron Watada is a Marine lieutenant who felt that his commission and the oath that he took as an officer actually compelled him to refuse to serve in the Vietnam. I almost said Vietnam, the Iraq War, because it was an illegal war.
It's very interesting because one of the lessons of Nuremberg, or was supposed to be of the Nuremberg trials back in the 1940s, is that there are times when people in the military should be compelled to disobey orders. That despite the fact that we want a military that generally obeys orders, there are some times when you go too far, that we were arguing back in the 40s that the Nazis went, that even if your superior orders you to do something, you should refuse. Even if your superior orders you to torture someone at Abu Ghraib, you should refuse, or the My Lai massacre.
It can be even more subtle than that. I know 2 young women who are currently serving sentences for desertion in the Air Force. Their case has not been very widely publicized because they prefer not to have it that way. They were afraid of retaliation. One is actually confined in a military prison for 9 months. The other is serving 32 or 36 days of restriction. These women joined the military because they wanted some structure in their lives. They were both very young women in their early 20s. They were told by recruiters that because they were women, one of them being married, there was no chance that they would be serving in Iraq. They dangled such things as translator training and other educational benefits in front of them. And what happened to these women is that in their basic training, they each had this aha moment. For one, it was when she was watching a military training film. And it was some sort of night exercise where they were engaging the enemy, and there was an enemy opponent who had been shot, who clearly was no threat, was not armed and wounded, and yet the training film showed soldiers being ordered to kill that wounded opponent.
To shoot the wounded man?
Yes, unarmed wounded opponent.
In a training video?
And she said, wait a minute, that's against what they told me
Geneva Convention.
I was supposed to be upholding and doing. So she said, how can they be showing this training film that shows
orders can you get that training film? Because I'll play it on the Inside Scoop if you can get it for me.
I think it actually has been posted
I will find it and I will play. We'll talk after the show because I want to play that for listeners. It's important they see that.
So that was her aha moment. Wait a minute, they're telling me one thing and then they're training me to do quite another thing. The other young woman was in a simulation exercise where they gave her a gun, loaded with like blanks or whatever they use, and they put her in some sort of sand pit, thing, which would, simulate what she would be doing, trenching, in country fighting. And her instructors, all dressed in black, and were charging, and she was expected to shoot. And so she had this gun in her hand, and she was pointing it at another person, and it all of a sudden said, what am I doing here?
Even with the blank, she couldn't.
And that was when she said, this is not where I should be.
And
there's no provision for these women or any soldier to say, wait a minute, now that I'm here, now that I see what this is about, I should be able to get conscientious objector status.
I was just going to ask you about that. That's exactly where I was going, is conscientious objector status, because that used to exist in Vietnam.
Actually, it still does exist.
In the law.
Right. But usually it is reserved for people
who
prior
are
to,
pacifists.
And because this is now a voluntary, a non-draft situation, the assumption is that anybody who signed up, of course, cannot be, by definition, a conscientious objector, but I do not believe that that is so. And in fact, there was a bill introduced in the House by Cynthia McKinney, who lost her seat, unfortunately, so that bill probably wouldn't be introduced. But it dealt with exactly that, the plight of enlisted military, and especially the Guard and Reserve, who are active now,
well, I would even say,
wait a minute, they're asking me to do something that I cannot in any good conscience do.
We did a show, actually a few months back. It was a memorial a family asked us to run. We were very glad to run to a young man, I don't think he may have been 19 years old, who died in Iraq, who joined because of 9/11, who joined because he felt like I did, at least about September 11th, we were attacked, and he wanted to fight them in Afghanistan, and that was his view, but then was sent to Iraq. And it would be nice if we had a military, if it's supposed to be a voluntary military, that would let you say, you know, I'd be willing to fight in Afghanistan, but I wouldn't be willing to fight
Well,
in
that's
Iraq.
what Aaron Watada said. Aaron Watada said to them, I would be willing to be posted to Afghanistan.
Because that is a war of self-defense rather than a preemptive war against a country
He believed
that didn't attack
that
us.
his commission and his oath allowed for that type of activity. He is a military man and very honorable. What he didn't believe was that Iraq was, in fact,
I have a
something
caller
that
on the line. I want to hear from him. It's Colin Wolfe. He's 19 years old from Manassas, Virginia. No, Colin's not on the line? Oh, we lost Colin. I'm sorry. I hope he'll call back, and I want to encourage anyone to call back. Oh, excuse me. I read the notice wrong. Colin Wolfe was the person who died, who we had on the show.
Okay.
Excuse me. I apologize. He was a serviceman to his family. But we did a very moving thing to him. But I do want to encourage people to call in and also to write on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. One of the questions I have is interesting how you approach people, and I like to approach people the same way. You said you show a sign and then you engage them. You sort of, instead of sort of marching and chanting slogans, which I think is, I have to say, very unhelpful in every protest I've seen. And maybe it works for the cameras, but the slogans, it seems, are not about dialogue. They're about monologue, and they tend to rhyme and be silly anyway.
Well, you can look at Code Pink, though. We like slogans with hooks. So one of our current slogans is, women say pull out.
Oh, God. Well, but see, even that might be a cute sign.
Well, yeah.
But when people are sort of shouting, there's not this kind of dialogue. So what you do is you try to, oh, here we are. Women say pull out. No, nothing further needs to be said on that. I will keep this. But let me ask you about this dialogue.
Souvenir.
You must have people that come up to you that see provocative signs like Bush lied and people died.
Innocents died.
Innocents died.
Right.
And you must have people that are very angry. I would suspect you have some people, whether military or a certain political bent, that give you peace activists a lot of aggression. How do you confront that aggression and try to turn it into dialogue? That must be hard to do.
Sometimes it is. I was in front of Walter Reed a few weeks ago at our Friday vigil, which we do every 7 to 9. And basically the idea there is to say support the troops, increase VA benefits, heal the wounded warrior, not so much an anti-war or peace message. But a young soldier came out, and he was very disturbed that we were there, thought that we were dishonoring the soldiers and the wounded inside Walter Reed Hospital, and just really wanted to vent. And so I let him vent, because that's what he needed right then. He wasn't any physical threat to me.
So you just sort of sat there while he gave a bunch of verbal abuse at you?
Yep, I did. And then I tried to engage him. And he was kind of not in a listening mode, but I hope he comes out another night and perhaps listens. Once again, there, but for the grace of God, go my son, my brother, my sister. There are many women in the military now. There are many women in the military who are in flak jackets holding guns and getting killed, whereas, once again, in the Vietnam era, that would have been unthinkable.
When we come back, I want to talk about your political goals. I want to talk about what actually you'd like to see Congress do, what you'd like to see the people watching this broadcast do, how, in fact, I know you want the war to end, but that's an ultimate goal. What are the tactics? What is the strategy to achieve that goal? And who are the leaders in America who can actually do it? Toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. You're welcome to join us if you wish, or comment on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. We'll be right back after this.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish,
If you give someone a fish,
You feed them for a day. Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, Mr. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and stir.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Search the web during the break for the training.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. Today's show is Diary of a Peace Activist. What makes them tick? Where are they going? What are their goals? I have a representative peace activist who's been a peace activist pretty much all of her life, at least since high school. Her name is Ellen Taylor, and she is with Code Pink. So we talked about your strategy, if you will. We talked about how you confront people one by one, your marches. Let's get to the ultimate goal. Obviously, we want to bring the troops home from Iraq, but how do we get there? Congress, as you know, the Senate is debating a non-binding resolution. That'll be the first step. Then the next step, it comes all this supplemental funding. Bush wants some $315 billion more dollars for a war that's already cost $400 billion. What's Code Pink going to do to try to stop that bill from becoming law?
All right. Just today, along with Voices for Creative Nonviolence, which is another peace group, we help them launch what's called Project Occupation. Now, what this is that we are asking citizens to go to their representatives' offices, both on the Hill and their field offices, and ask them to stop the surge and to defund the war. And we are asking people who feel like engaging in civil disobedience to not leave their representative's office until they receive satisfaction, whatever that might be, or they are arrested. And we had 10 women arrested in Senator McCain's office this afternoon.
I was just going to say, now that kind of strategy is a two-edged sword because it definitely gets you publicity. It also can anger people who feel like this kind of debate should be had. You should persuade your representative, you should talk with them, but when you occupy their offices, it's, if not violent, which it isn't, it's at least extremely aggressive and assertive. And I'm sure there are people who don't want to do that last aspect of it. Why does Code Pink, and why do you, because I think you clearly believe this, why do you feel that such aggressive, assertive actions are necessary?
Well, one, as you say, is if we just politely leave when they ask us to, then we really haven't had an impact. As you note, sometimes it does take civil disobedience to have an impact. And Gandhi, who you mentioned before, and Martin Luther King realized this fact. And so I think in the peace movement, we have to really commit to civil disobedience. Now, we realize, though, that this is not for everyone. So even just calling your elected representative's office, for example, as that Iraq veterans ad that was on the Super Bowl last night, it said, call Senator Warner's office. And so we're saying, call your elected representative's office and let them know what you think.
This time we do have a caller on the line. Okay. I am assured this time. It's Fred from Great Falls. Fred, welcome to the Inside Scoop.
Yes, good morning. Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Yes, I have something about the military that, you know, we all sorry and worried about them. But before somebody goes and hire a military, they have to think about it. That maybe, you know, they just follow their parents or as a job, but they sign a paper and by that they get some advantage, like mortgage, like you know,
money for college, oftentimes.
Yes, easier for car. As I remember, I'm Iranian American. They just got me out of the house and they gave it to somebody from Vietnam, so with no down payment and nothing. So I know, I feel the difference. What is the person who doesn't go to military? So before they go,
do you have a question?
Has to explain to them, hey, you signed this paper, then you don't have choice. You have
to
I
see your point.
You know, you sold your freedom, you sell your freedom. And this has to be, talk to people, tell them before they go there.
Fred, that's a great point. Let me pose it to our guest, because I'm curious to know if you ever talk to people who are considering joining the military to talk them out of it, which sounds like what Fred's suggesting.
A number of organizations, Grandmothers for Peace, for example, who's kind of an affiliated organization, and someday I hope to be a Grandmothers for Peace. Emmett, are you listening?
Leave him alone, for God's sake.
Actually go to recruiting stations and say, we want to enlist. Don't send our young, send us.
Well, they won't take you.
Well, that's true, but it does, once again, make a point. And they have been arrested to do so. We also go into the schools. We also go into schools and do what is sometimes called counter-recruitment, or what is also called military alternatives workshops. So that
you talk about the Peace Corps, things like that?
Or also scholarship opportunities that exist independent of military service. My husband has done this, for example, with Vets for Peace, and there are groups of Code Pink women who do that also, go into the schools to actually balance the message that the barrage of information that the military recruiters are giving them. Because as you remember, the No Child Left Behind Act basically gives the military high school kids' names and addresses and phone numbers unless their parents actively opt out, and we actually educate parents on opting out. Also, my son, he didn't tell me about this until after he did it, but he went to both the Army recruiting station and the Marine recruiting station.
To do what?
To find out about enlisting. He, of course, as I said, thank God, didn't tell me about the stuff he'd done it, but we have a good relationship. And so his story is he is actually interested in law enforcement and criminal justice and actually wants to be a Washington police officer.
And of course you can do that without joining the military. But let me ask you this.
But what I'm saying is he was told that he would do better in his career if he enlisted in the military and became a MP, military police officer. And so he went to find out about enlisting to become an MP. And the line he was getting was, well, of course, you know, you can join, we'll put you in the military police, you'll get training, this will help your career. And then as they kept talking and talking and talking and talking, a few things were said that made him, he's a very intelligent
do you remember what was said that turned him off?
Well, one thing was the recruiter stepped out in the hallway to take a phone call from his superior officer, and he was saying, and my son could overhear because he hadn't stepped far enough away, that the guy was saying, we have somebody right here, he wants to sign up for the infantry and wants to just go over to Iraq and you know, kick some butt.
Yeah, and of course, when I think of MPs, I think of the Abu Ghraib officers. Well, most of them were MPs.
So yeah, so
not trained and told to do awful things to put them.
Yeah, so that actually turned him off in terms of, I think that may have been the Army. Or maybe it was the Marine, but the other station, he was talking to the recruiter, and while he was talking to the recruiter, the supervisor of the entire station that had a number of recruiters came in and called everybody into a conference room and started chewing them out because they hadn't met their recruitment targets. Yeah. And my son,
no one has. It's way low.
That's true, but my son heard the way those guys are being screamed at and said, uh-oh, make it at the dots. Like I don't want to be treated like that.
Let me ask you this. The First Amendment, I always carry my pocket Constitution around. Yeah. The First Amendment of the Constitution guarantees your right to go in and to schools or wherever and give the other side. But I would bet there's a lot of resistance. Has Code Pink tried this, and has there been resistance?
Well, once again, a lot of us are mothers. And we have kids in school.
So so you go in as mothers. We go in right. They're your kids.
As the mother of the kids in the school. We also are very active, once again, I said in churches, in PTAs. I mean, we just don't do peace. We do family and
Let me ask you this.
Community.
We only have a few minutes left, so I have to rush you through it. We have so much to talk about. In terms of the leaders of today, who you think really could lead this peace movement, you mentioned Dennis Kucinich. Is that who you'd like to see be president of the United States?
Well, Dennis Kucinich has always come out as a peace candidate. Code Pink does have a Vote for Peace campaign where we ask people to pledge not to vote for candidates who will not support a withdrawal from Iraq and an end to wars of aggression. So
the next question, obviously, is the first woman to make a real strong, serious run for the presidency, Hillary Clinton. You women probably aren't so supportive of her.
Well, there were 6 women, actually, who were arrested at Hillary Clinton's office on Tuesday. Exactly because of her stand. And the poster said, you know, Hillary, we need you to be a woman for peace, not just a woman.
Is she coming around? It seems like some of her rhetoric is at least
better
on the score than it was
she was right down there at the DNC meeting saying, you know, if Bush does not withdraw the troops, you know, by 2008, I will do so. But the point is, though, that's 2 years. 2 years is too long.
Ellen Taylor, that's all the time we have. An hour goes very quick. I want to thank you for coming here on the Inside Scoop. Again, your website is
CodePinkAlert.org.
CodePinkAlert.org. You can find out anything you want about the Code Pink organization. You can ask them. You can join them in their marches.
Join us. Actually, all it takes is a few girlfriends and a pink wardrobe.
And if you're a guy, you can join as well.
You can also.
Ellen Taylor, thank you for coming here on the Inside Scoop. That's it for today's show. Tune in tomorrow. We're going to talk about the Scooter Libby trial. This is Mark Levine signing off.